Hello, I'm Pam Bailey. I am co-host of Voices Unlocked, which is the podcast produced by MoreThanOurCrimes, which advocates for individuals in federal prison. And we want to bring their voices and experiences out to you. And my co-host is Robert Barton, who's co-founder of MoreThanOurCrimes. He just got out in February after 30 years. Our special guest today is Eyone Williams. We're going to get into the meat of the subject in a little bit, which is this move to treat really young people as adults in the criminal justice system. But first, I want Eyone to talk a little bit about his organization, which is called DC Blacks. It's interesting because you may not know that if you talk to people in prison who are not from DC, and that's both staff and prisoners, you hear really a negative response when they hear DC Blacks, people from DC who are Black. And even if you Google it, which you might want to try to do, you come up with associations with gangs, violent gangs. But so Eyone, why did you choose a name DC Blacks for your movement when it has such a negative connotation?
Probably because the same thing you just talking about, but I'm gonna let them explain.
Yeah. I mean, I was listening to the word you used, the co-op, and I never used that word. I'm gonna use that word. I always used to use the word commandeer.
Yeah.
But like Rob said, DC Blacks is a movement that has gone through many different phases. In the beginning of it, it was just something that I was doing because I had figured out social media. And I had a lot of friends that were still in prison. And I got a lot of calls for things like books or money orders, things that I really couldn't facilitate to everyone. Mm-hmm. So some of my buddies that were more closer than others, you know, I could send them $20 or something here, but I was just coming home. So what I did was I created this thing on social media where I was just, there's a saying, out of sight, out of mind, where we come from, right? Mm-hmm. And I figured that if I put a lot of these guys' pictures, from Rob to all the other guys that we know that have gotten second chances now, that's home doing good things, that some people will remember them. And in the process of that, I could generate support, contact for them, because like, you know, I know guys that have been in prison 50 years and they've lost contact with everybody. And I put a picture of them on the internet and their granddaughter found them, and that's a letter and that's a support. So it just started out as something like that. But later on, when I realized that it had such bad connotations, which we already know because we've experienced them, I said, I'm going to take it and I'm going to make it something else. It was only supposed to be a support system, but I learned this community work thing, right, by working in other spaces, which we could talk about later. But when I go in any room, I'm kind of quiet. I learn things. So in the process of working with all these nonprofits, I seen what they were doing geared towards kids, geared toward gun violence, even geared toward reentry. I said, but nothing was geared to just connect. So I thought I could fill the void. And that's how I started my version of what this DC Blacks movement is. But it just came from a support system, an idea of me not knowing what to do, but just wanting to do something.
And you wanted to make it a positive term. DC Blacks as being positive in terms of community, helping each other.
And I think that like the key point that he probably didn't say and what drew, not so much just because you knowing all the people and you been in these spaces with, I mean, like we've done time together and all those things, but it's just like you was talking about how you had closer partners, because, you know, we know hundreds of dudes from doing time.
Over those years.
Exactly. And so, but it's different level of friendships and comradeships and all that. And so like I can get the ones that is immediately mine or my partners. At the same time, I want to get some others, but I don't have the motherfucking means to do it. And so what I saw is like on certain days you would put certain people up and then certain people would be sending that guy money.
Right. Even if they weren't people that I knew.
Even if they were people that you knew. And I thought that was big because it's like it's giving access to everyone to help. And
that was called Free the Real Friday.
Free the Real Friday. Yeah. And it's like crowdsourcing help for guys in prison, and then wasn't nobody thinking of it in that aspect. So, man, I commend you for that.
Man, thank you.
But so what? Well, why does DC Blacks have a negative connotation to other people?
In my opinion, DC Blacks gonna have a negative connotation because over the years, some of the guys from the District of Columbia that were sent into the federal system were your guerrilla convicts, so to speak, right? And you have good stories and bad stories, but for some reason, the bad stories are the one that live on like legends. And, you know, a lot of people that encounter guys from Washington, D.C. had met convicts like what we were. And what I mean that is that you had some guys that were, you know, intellectuals, they were law library legends. You had some guys that were gladiators, and you had some guys that were in the other, less reputable things, but that's a core. And I always say for a person that's from somewhere that's like a state or a county, they would never fully understand a whole influx of DC guys, because it would be the equivalent of closing the California Department of Corrections or the New York Department of Corrections. Of course, that's on a much bigger scale, but my point is you'll get everything from a pickpocket to a kingpin. Most jurisdictions only send their federal prisoners to federal prisoners, so you encounter a certain type of convict, human being, whatever word we choose to use for these people that walk through the door. With DC, they don't realize that they are meeting anybody on the criminal scale. So I think that is what leads to some of these bad connotations. And to be honest, as a guy from Washington, DC, if we don't understand you, and it's a cultural clash, like a lot of times we grow up here and we never see some of the things we see in federal prisons. So if you send an aggressive group of people to a place where they really not used to seeing some of those things, I think a lot of bad stories may come out. And some of those stories was in effect years before we got there.
It was in effect years before we got there, but I just was thinking of the aspect of going towards what this episode is about. We went to there, so like you never see a young white child in the penitentiary. Like I've never seen nobody under 25, 28 that's white in the penitentiary. And so you get this type of molding coming through Lawton, coming through the juvenile block, where as though you have to, I always told the story when I come to the juvenile block, and this, like I got in the salad port and I heard like hot dogs. I got chicken. I got this, that, and the third. They call it my food. Trade. They call it a trade, but I don't really know what they say. So I wake up in the morning, my food ain't on my slot. And now I got to fight to eat in the morning. And so that breeds you in a certain way from the beginning that you have to be that. And I don't think that a lot of other states or other cities or people that's coming to prison now go through those type of gladiator schools or introductions into prison. And so when you're talking about sending us from kids and we getting that type of introduction or we getting that type of indoctrination that you have to be this way to survive in these environments, and then you sending me to the federal prison where that's like, now I'm dealing with ABs, now I'm dealing with Aryan Brotherhood, I'm dealing with Mexican Mafia, all these different type of gangs in the gang culture, then of course we're going to coalesce with each other, but we're going to keep that same mentality. And I think that that's where that came from.
Yeah, I also think that that's how they interpret or put a label on us as if we're a gang, because we've never represented or operated in a gang sense. But when you put us in a place where everybody else has a gang mentality or a gang formation, they address you as that, which is where the term DC Blacks, in my opinion, came from, because the BOP had no way to label them. Those were Crips, those were Bloods, those was Aryan Brotherhood. Well, who the hell are these guys? And they refused to call the guys what they really were at the time. The guys really were Moorish Americans. Those were the guys that were standing out, making this thing some type of a flag being planted. And I'm not going to say that all of them was, but like the Moors and the Black nationalist movement that came out of the DC Department of Corrections were these guys that were quote unquote problem inmates, whether it was violence or litigation. So, that I think exploded into other things, and now they have to label us as a group, because everybody from DC wasn't even included in the problem group.
Yeah, I think the two most important things you said is, one, most DC, 98% people from DC were incarcerated are Black. If you take yourselves out and just look at federal cases, it's mostly white. And number two, they're coming in with federal sentences, which is a lot of racketeering, a lot of conspiracy.
Different behavior.
Very different. And you guys are street crimes, which is in any other state would be in the state prison.
Which is a humongous difference culturally for a prison population.
Yeah, so they see you guys as Black and violent, which feeds into some of the stereotypical stigmas we find out in the community. So you mentioned something that is the other thing we wanted to talk about today, which is that there is a movement in Congress right now, is a bill that's going to be going to the Senate that was instigated by President Trump to, one, allow kids as young as 14 to be tried as adults. Usually has been older, but also to take the discretion away from judges. And we're talking about DC, just DC specifically, singling out DC, take the discretion away from judges to give more lenient sentences to people under the age of 24. Now, both of you went in at the age of 16, which is really close to this 14 age they're talking about. So I'm just sort of curious. I'm going to ask you both individually to comment. First, think about when you went in the criminal justice system before you even got to prison. How do you think it changed your trajectory to be treated as an adult at that age? I guess one thing I want you to address is people think that because you committed a crime that's associated with murder, you no longer are a child.
And so, like, looking back to that time from at today and looking back retrospectively, I understand that I was a child, but I also understand, like, how immature my mind was. And so my mind was so immature that my co-defendant was already 18 at the time that I was arrested, because he got arrested before me. And because he was over to jail, I kind of like wanted to get Title 16 so I could go over to jail. Now, to think back and think about that, you just see how immature and stupid that was, because it's the difference between me spending 30 years in jail to just being locked up until I'm 21 years old. That decision, period. And so, like, going through these jails, like, I always think about, like, we used to be on the juvenile block, so we used to have to get the adult commissary slip to get cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that?
Yeah.
So it's like, you telling me that you about to give me 100 years and you treat me like a dog in all other aspects. Like, we don't get we ain't going to school for nothing. Mm-hmm. We barely getting out the wreck. You got us on the tier all day with nothing but this phone. and so what's the fight over and all those type of things. But I can't get no cigarettes because I'm a juvenile.
Yeah. I make that example a lot of times. People think that that's irrelevant, but that was huge symbolically to me.
Yeah. And it's like, so in every other way you treat me as an adult. And what that did to me was, it's kind of like what we was just talking about with that indoctrination process. So it's like, when you're down Oak Hill, so I went through the juvenile system. That's our juvenile system, Oak Hill. And you there, and the counselor is always telling you about graduating and you going over to jail. So when you go over to jail, when you're in this immature mind, it's like a next step up the ladder. And so they plan on that. And you getting in these, so now because I'm over to jail, they don't fight no more, they stab. And so now you getting into this culture and you getting indoctrinated into this. And this is how locking up a juvenile, locking up a child, right, and not giving them no service or no type of help only makes them worse. Because you are setting them up for failure. You setting, they brain still malleable, they still immature, all those type of things. And then you placing them around adults. And it's just crazy. Like, and, like, if it wasn't for, I would say my mother giving me a solid foundation of education and all those things, man, a lot of people don't make it back from that.
Yeah.
What about you? When you think back, were you a kid or were you an adult because you'd entered into this world of crime?
Rob said something that, man, took me on a memory. And he said that his co-defendant was already over to jail, and in some type of way he wanted to do that, wanted to, go that route with whatever occurred. And for some type of way, as we grow up, we had this thing, at least when we come from backgrounds like us, that we already want to be a big boy. Not necessarily accept it, but we want to be grown already. So when you ask me to think about that, of course, I echo everything Rob said, but it took me to grow into a full-fledged adult to acknowledge that I was a child. And I would have never agreed with you that I was a child. I knew that I was young, but I would only use words for myself like juvenile, teenager, because it fit into the term that the media was propagating already about super predator, which took me back to some things you said when you first asked this question. But once you hold me accountable as an adult and you send me over DC jail, right? And now you're charging me as an adult, everything still changed, but I'm a child at heart. For an example, I work with different organizations that go into some of these juvenile places. And one of the organizations, and I'm not going to be long-winded about it, they had a problem that when I individually encounter some of the youth, that I would get away from what the criteria was for what they were coming there for. They were coming there, quote unquote, for education, but the youth that were charged as an adult had already figured out that GED is not going to help me right now. Now, no way am I stomping or spitting on education, but some of them would ask me, you got charged as an adult at 16. How can you help me? What is a 23-110? What is the stuff my lawyer talking about? And the organization which I was with encouraged me not to get into law or legal conversations with them. And my problem, which is one of the reasons why I started the nonprofit component of the DC Blacks. At first, it was just a movement. The reason why I got legal was able for me to be able to go and do what I wanted with these people. So anyway, my point to them was, I have a problem sitting there telling him that let's read this book or let's do this arithmetic when he's about to get 60 years. And he's asking me, how does he prevent himself from spending 60 years in prison? And I'll just stop there. So some of those things are the things that drive me right now, because I know that when I was 16, going back to being a child, going back to being immature, I didn't know what a lawyer was supposed to do for you. I didn't understand what a Fourth Amendment issue was. I didn't understand what ineffective assistance to counsel was. But they're saying that you are a child and now you may get life in prison, and these are things that we're supposed to help you with. But how can you ever help me? Like they say, the closed mouth don't get fed. If I can't articulate to a lawyer or a paralegal that, yo, this is what really happened, or this is what happened, and my buddy said that this is the law, but everybody that's coming to help me, that's getting paid to come to help me, is telling me read Dr. Seuss. I'm gonna stop there.
Well, I mean, like through that, what I gather, but like I just feel as though like a lot of times, like especially from this super predator era that we were just talking about, right? And so, you know, like when you're growing up in these communities and you're young, you and your brain malleable, and you just, a lot of times, like, you're a product of your environment, for lack of better words. And so, and on top of that, like, I feel as though, like, I was one of the best students ever. I got all A's in school. I wanted to be a mathematician. But as I'm looking around in my schools and my community, I don't see nobody doing this type of shit, right? And so because I don't see it, I see Slim right there getting some money on the corner. I see this dude, he hitting it. This is what I see. This is what is being shown to me. And then not only what I'm seeing in my community, but when we're talking about the super predator era and the news and the media, everything is telling me that this is what I am. This is what I'm supposed to be, right? So subconscious, you taking all those things on, and then you saying, yeah, man, I'm this big, tad, tough guy. I'm grown. I'm a man. And so I want to be in these situations to actualize this, or to show you that I can deal with this. And that's the part of that I don't think people understand, and that shows your immaturity. You see what I'm saying? So to tell me, and so now when we're talking about 15 years forever, the Incarceration Reduction Amendment Act, and they saying that kids are feeling though like they can do 15 years. I think that more so what they saying or what they hearing is that, one, a child, just like we was, a lot of times says things to what we call to look sweet or to sound sweet. They don't know what the fuck they saying. They don't really even believe what they saying. They don't really understand. They don't think that far. That's the part of the brain science that we talk. They don't think that far to really understand what's going on. And I know that because when you go in there and you talk to them, you talking about a person that did 20 years and all that, and they come down like, damn, so you did 30 years. How you do that? This down to 30, like they're amazed. I can't, because they can't see that far, and I think that that's something that ain't really highlighted, and that really needs to be highlighted.
But you made a point that made me think about it, just to go back to our personal experiences. When I was young and I was living that particular lifestyle, right? I was never participating in anything I was doing based on I will get out in this amount of time, or I will get out in that amount of time. In my mind, my young, impressionable mind, I thought that being as though I was under 18, I wasn't going to get charged as an adult at all. And if there was a law out back then that said that if you were charged as an adult, you would get out at 15, I still wouldn't have deliberately made a conscious effort to commit a crime and say, yo, I'm only going to have to do 15 years. I don't think there's no youngin' out here right now committing no crime saying, I'm going to get out 15 years anyway. I think most of the people...
crime. I don't think they're going to get caught.
I think they're thinking that they're not going to get caught, and if they do, they will be charged as a juvenile. So ignorance is listing some of the matters.
And on top of that, I, in a lot of cases, in a lot of ways, Pam always talk about the statistics in it. Most of them are impulsive crimes.
I mean, the science and the Supreme Court has agreed that that's how we made the decisions at the time. Exactly. And we wasn't...
so it's not even a contemplated thought about the
that law at the time.
So when you think about the fact that you were, one thing you said I think was really important. At that age, you do not want to be labeled a child, because you'd never say you were a child.
I mean, maybe a real child, and what I mean by a real child raised in a childlike environment. At 12 and 13, some of us, we coming from war zones.
Yeah, no, plus I remember even with me, for instance, and I didn't come from those backgrounds, I wouldn't have been labeled a child.
Yeah, I mean, you always want to be sophisticated enough to be a little bit older.
But do you think, if you were to answer somebody who said, if you were old enough to commit an act that in their minds, people who come from very different neighborhoods would say a real child would never even conceive of doing something like you did. So how would you respond to say that even in that context, you were still a child? You think the main thing that you couldn't see had consequences, or what else would you say was?
I definitely would agree with how you framed that. But what I would like to start off by saying is that, and I'm participating in it as well, right? To even define a real child and a child. A child in Vietnam that grew up during the Vietnam War is still a child. But if you place him in a room with even myself at 12 or 13, he's experienced some traumas that I would never understand. And I grew up in the murder capital area. There's nothing to what we see on TV about Vietnam and napalm and things like that. So my point is, first and foremost, a child from Omaha, a child from Vietnam, or a child from Southeast Washington, D.C. is a child. That's what I had to grow into understanding. Now, in the culture that we came from, we grew up in the late 80s, early 90s. Gangster music was our music, gangster rap, the movies that we seen that was presented to us, and I'm not trying to blame everything on society. What we were into was street, hood, gangster, thug things. So we are already in a subculture. You know what I'm saying? When I'm saying that we were already in a subculture, I'm talking about these children that were labeled as super predators and attacked for such, which again, I got to keep saying it, is a recycle of the same thing. Now they're trying to lower the age to go at the people that are 14 to say that, they are as dangerous as this sophisticated older criminal. I just don't believe it. So I don't think that we should differentiate what is a child. I mean, I do understand that this is a country where as though we're supposed to be held accountable, or some of us are held accountable if we don't have the privilege to not be held accountable. And for the child that will fall victim to this situation right here, that it takes other people like myself and Rob and you for people to be able to understand what the dangerousness of the matter is.
The way it works is that in all the other jurisdictions, the judge basically has a hearing for a juvenile to ascertain whether or not they have basically outgrown the juvenile system and it don't work for them no more. And so because we don't get this, and because juveniles are child as adult, and because they're not going to never get a second chance to get out of jail when you get them 70, 60, 80 years and all those type of things, because in D.C. you don't have no parole. When you sentencing these juveniles as 14-year-old to life and all those things, that's exactly what it is. They're going to do life in prison. They're never going to come home. And you're never going to meet an Eyone. You're never going to meet a Robert Barton. You're never going to meet a Harleen Flowers and all these other people out here, James Cobb, on and on and on and on, is doing all these amazing things and all this amazing work out here. And so those are the things, yes, there needs to be accountability, but you got to take in context of where are we sending children to?
And what are we doing with these children that are at risk to commit these crimes or be victims?
What are we doing before that?
What are we doing before that? I mean, if you can say we're throwing them away at 14, what are we doing with them? The population that is, most likely to fall into this trap, what are we doing for them?
Exactly.
And I think you said something important, Rob, is that also for those who do get out, but not in for life, you said we're resending them.
Which was a big part of the Kent case. What happens to them later?
Who will now be hardened because they're around much older people.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes violent.
Yeah, right? I mean, so I guess that's the last question to you, Rob. So how would you describe the impact of someone who is a child now being housed with people who are adults?
I mean, the impact is that, I felt as though I had to be that. I was a man.
I learned that.
The system don't care nothing about you. And once you walk through these doors, Tony Hammond used to say that. I don't care if you're 16, 17, if you come in here, you're a grown man. And I'm going to treat him as such. And so nobody's looking at you as a youth. That's a 50-year-old man that has been doing 20 years already in the penitentiary. They slap your head off your shoulder if the need be, if you disrespect them, because this is this land and this is the order of how we conduct things in this place. And if it's a different world. Either you're going to fall in line and do what we doing, or you're going to get ran over. And so because you understand that at that young age, now I have to, quote unquote, elevate my game in a violence level just to survive these type of violence. And so you go a long time in those stages until you mature And now you can navigate your environment. You understand how your social intelligence is built up. Now you can navigate your environment without violence. Now you have the cachet because you've done all those things that you don't need to use violence. And so now you had the breather or the time. But when you're a child, you don't get that leeway. And this is what this type of person and all that does to children.
I mean, you just made me remember all of our buddies that didn't even make it to that 24, 25-year-old stage when they was able to do it. They had already got life sentences between 16 and 26 by not being able for catching murders and assaults in jail. I mean, and I don't want to name nobody that I'm thinking about right now, but one particular person is one of the best people that you would ever get to know. And every time he was in this situation, he was being attacked. He didn't even have the skills to be able to avoid what the attack was. He was attacked just from where he was from and how he looked. And he ended up having 2 and 3 murders along the way. When you just use the word murder, a person automatically says, oh, what did he do? But you don't understand what happened to him in the process of. I mean, and this one particular guy was placed in some prisons that he was never supposed to be at a certain age.
Mm.
Yeah, so basically you've taken somebody who maybe had potentially putting them in an environment where they have to survive.
They can't
watch their back every minute, and now you've made him, if he wasn't violent before, he like has to be violent.
He learned it the same way people learn negotiation skills. Yeah. His negotiation skills that he learned not to take up for him was to speak the same language was being spoken to him.
So I think a good thought to end with is that, going back to what you said about a child should be a child as a child is a child. You can't just decide that in a particular setting, all of a sudden they're not a child. A child that goes through trauma is going to act differently, but they're still a child. So hopefully everybody will speak out to their...
Please.
Yeah, if you have somebody who votes in Congress, like DC people don't, we need to speak out and protect DC laws, but also really from across the country. We should resist this kind of push.
I mean, I would like to just add one more thing, and that if we're going to hold children accountable on this extreme level, can we do more to help them before they get to the point where as though they deserve this extreme attention?
Yeah,
that's a key point. I don't need to say nothing. That's a key point.
That's most important.
What I would say is that, man, we are living examples that no kid is irredeemable, no kid is incorrigible, no kid is irreparable, and that before you judge the book, like read what's inside, look at the nurture and the nature and all those things and what's going on, and then come back with a decision for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening. I hope you subscribe, and hey, discuss this around the dinner table. It's a really important topic. Thank you.
Thank you.